From the vibrant heart of the UAE to every corner of the world, welcome to Season 2 of the International Classroom Podcast. Here, we not only explore education through a global lens, but also celebrate the unique needs, experiences, and perspectives each student brings. In each episode, we bring you insights and discussions from experts and educators around the world. They share their invaluable experiences, the challenges they faced, and the innovative solutions they've championed. So, whether you're an educator, a student, or simply someone with a passion for lifelong learning, we invite you to be part of this journey. Now, before we dive into today's episode, a quick note. Ensure you're following us on your favorite streaming platforms to always stay in the loop. And if you're tuning in via Deep Teaching on YouTube and you haven't clicked that subscribe button yet, do us a huge favor, do it now. We've been privileged to host some truly remarkable guests, and your support in sharing and liking these episodes means the world to us. On to the episode. Gabi, welcome to the International Classroom Podcast. How are you doing today?
Super. Thanks so much for having me, Alex.
So just to give some context for our listeners out there, whereabouts are you in the world at this moment in time?
I am currently in South Africa, in Cape Town, South Africa. But I spend some time all over the world. So I was telling you earlier that I'm a bit of a nomad. So currently I'm in Cape Town.
Yeah, we've spoken a few times, haven't we? Different things. So we did the fireside chat. And I think even the last time I spoke to you, one of the times you're probably in the Netherlands. I think one of the times were you in Vienna or Italy or...
Oh, no, I was in Lisbon.
Lisbon now, is it?
Yeah.
Sorry, I get confused all these places that you're off to and doing. Sorry.
Yeah.
So... really interesting sort of background that you've got yourself there. And I'm interested, I've never spoke with someone who's been involved in Silicon Valley. So I'm really interested to know, what was Silicon Valley like for you?
Oh, well, it was really interesting place as an educator, because when I spent time in Silicon Valley, I was not there as a technologist or working on a startup. I was working in the public school system. And I was also working in, after school programs, STEM programs, all these sort of what at the time to me seemed, this was about 10, almost 8 years ago. So at the time it seemed very progressive and a lot of learning and new things for me. But yeah, I spent time in Palo Alto specifically, and San Francisco, and sort of the whole Bay Area. And for those folks who are not familiar with what Silicon Valley is, it's sort of the heart of technology. And I often say, it's where places like Facebook or Meta and HP and Google and all of those really big inspiring tech companies we hear of have their campuses, and it's known as the birthplace. Like Palo Alto, the city I worked in, is known as like the birthplace of Silicon Valley. And what is also interesting about Palo Alto, it has one of the top performing primary school districts in the United States, which is kind of an interesting coincidence if you are, thinking about innovation, the future of learning, and then also top performance. And that's really a place that is an exemplar of all of those things. And I guess what was really interesting from being a teacher in the classroom, one day I was like looking through my student class list, and I look at all the names and all the parent email addresses, and I was just a teacher then, and I was like, wow, this is, if I ever were to start a company, this would be a very valuable list of contacts to have, which is just your parent list. And it was kind of in that moment that I realized, like, wow, they're huge venture capitalists' children and like VPs of engineering whose children I worked with. And the expectation of a teacher in that environment to know like the best learning sciences, the best pedagogy, the best way to deal with diversity in the classroom, those are like expected, and you were held to a very, very high standard as a teacher in that environment, basically because you're working with exceptional people, like some of the most exceptional people in the world's children. And there comes a tremendous sort of pressure. And I imagine like Alex, Dubai is probably quite similar in some ways. It's like a very international community. People flock there around specific values or things. And you've got a lot of high performing individuals, children that you're working with. And so as a teacher, that was a really interesting experience. It also challenged me to make sure I was staying up to date and constantly learning. Like I had to be on my game with everything, and really interrogating everything I did. And surprisingly, the other interesting thing about Silicon Valley was just how technology was used in classrooms and like the role of technology in the classroom. So often when I came back to South Africa, a lot of people would say to me, like, what are the classrooms like, the future classrooms like, are there smart boards and, lots of high tech, iPads everywhere. And, what is the future like? And it was very like device and technology focused. And I often would say actually the most surprising thing to me about what the future of learning looks like was the emphasis on humans in the room and how students and teachers thought about learning. And fundamentally, that to me was the most the most differentiated thing about learning environments in Silicon Valley was often that students were agents of their own, driving their own learning journeys. That was and that changed the way a classroom ran. It changed the orientation of a teacher in the classroom, where the teacher spent their time. But also very, very young children, even 8-year-olds, second graders, were very much aware that they were driving their own learning journeys. And that to me was like what the future of learning was like. That if you ask me, what does the future of learning look like? It looks like young people driving their own learning paths and, able to drive their own learning journeys.
Sounds like a fantastic experience. And I imagine you probably took a lot away from that. And so let's fast forward then. So between obviously working in Silicon Valley to where we are now, what happened in between to make you take a step out of the classroom and start Mindjoy?
Yeah, it was actually, I would kind of say I slipped into starting an edtech startup, but it was kind of gradual. I came back to South Africa and I kind of had this question around like, what does it take to engineer communities of learning, communities that value learning? That was fundamentally sort of the phenomena I was interested in. And could you do this if you could create the right environments? Do all children kind of rise to the challenge of self-learning? How do we inculcate that for more students? And I started working sort of mostly on what was like my side hustle, because I was still working in schools, but then I had sort of my after school program and summer programs that I ran in South Africa, holiday camps and that kind of thing. And so that was my own business on the side. So it was first still in, 1 foot in the classroom, still 1 foot out, and trying to figure out this entrepreneurial journey. And just also, I think also, I'm sure you relate to this as a teacher consuming a lot of content, you also start wanting to create it yourself. You want to make things too, or you also feel creative and, I could do this. And so I started working out of school, and then basically I did a master's program at some point. I started my master's in inclusive innovation in education, which I looked at what is the minimum viable infrastructure for like this question again, like engineering communities of learning, and how do we help people, young people, and teachers that maybe don't have technical backgrounds, or specifically, like if we look at where the world's going, we need more STEM skills. How do we help bridge that gap? So that was really a thing I became super interested in. And then somewhere along the line, my master's became my work. And like the thesis became a real world project, and we started working with teachers all over. And we transitioned sort of during COVID. Mindjoy was started as like an online coding school. And from that, we did a lot of project-based learning, specifically rooted in projects, coding projects. And through that, we were part of the OpenAI beta, where we designed this hackathon that we did with thousands of like students all over the world. And it was a project where they could build their own AI projects to do their homework, almost like a chatbot, like ChatGPT. And this was before ChatGPT. And so we had this large set of data, basically, which gave us good understanding in terms of children's first experiences with this technology. How does it change their learning journey? What is the role of projects and STEM, and how does that change? And then also how that will impact the teachers. And so we had this like mini microcosm over a year of how basically AI would change the way young people teach and learn, and how teachers would facilitate in those environments. And then ChatGPT came out about a year ago, and so we were sort of had just before ChatGPT came out, we had sort of started our teacher training programs to like sort of navigate this changing world. And then the timing could have been better, and the rest is history, because I think we expected that change would happen a little bit more gradually. So we thought it was like we had like 2 years where we could help teachers get up to speed with this change and share our learning. And then that obviously happened in months. So for the past year, we've been teaching teachers how to use AI, and then building our platform and tools for them to use AI in the classroom.
And it's the platform that I'm really interested in you speaking about, because I'm a huge advocate of it. We've had conversations, obviously, months before, and I've been using it in my classroom. But maybe not everyone is fully aware of it, because it's one of those, I'm going to call it a silent assassin. It's going to sneak up on you, and it's then going to do the job, because it's a fantastic platform. So for the people out there listening and watching, just elaborate then on what the Mindjoy platform is.
Cool. So basically our Mindjoy platform enables any teacher really to create an AI assistant for classroom specific tasks that facilitate learning in your classroom. So almost like a tutor is one model we use. Like we say, you can create a tutor, an AI tutor, and then you can use it with your students, and you can almost use it as a precision tool for exactly whatever the assisted experience is that you would like to create. And you have the controls and visibility and transparency for using this technology in the classroom. So really, for us, it's about the human in the loop. So the teacher, we always talk about teachers plus AI, not like AI tutors are going to replace the teacher. Like we just don't believe that. And I don't trust anyone who says like, any technology solution is like the silver bullet. But really what I think for us is like, the aspiration is to give teachers superpowers like that enhance what they do. Or, some teachers say, I think of it as cloning myself. So that I have like many versions of me helping my students, and then I can get insights, but I also have control, and there's guardrails, and I can see where I need to support. So really it's creating like these almost super teacher tools, to take learning to the next level.
Yeah, I think to give the listeners an insight. So from my personal experience of using it, obviously you set the prompt for the tutor that you want, and there's different obviously criteria whether you want it as a science or an English, history, math, a quiz. So I've been using it from a science perspective. So I set mine up for the topic I'm doing. So I think the example I've posted about most recently was chemistry for my year 8 class. So I set them up, and we were talking about structures, ionic bonds, and those types of things. So I've utilized it when like I'm in a research task, or when they're finding out information, or as that assistant in terms of you can go to this when you need help or you have a question. And what's so good about the software, the platform that you have, is that you're not just putting in a question and answer. You can set it to give different types of responses, and whether it follows up with a question related response. So the students are then having to type in answers. So there's an element of assessment and students having to interact with information. And there was one part, and again, I posted about this, where a girl said, when we're drawing out on the board about the bonds, and she went, "Sir, is that a lattice?" And I was like, "Yeah, it is. Where did you find that?" And she went, "Yeah, the AI tutor told me." And it's like those types of things. It's great. But it's those types of things. And the students, when you actually ask them, it's like, "Do you prefer it?" And at the starting point, they're like, these questions, I keep having to, because they just want the information they want to consume rather than create. Mm-hmm. But once you consistently start to use it, and you're saying to them, "Look, this is a good thing because it's checking your understanding, and you can have this conversation back and forward," they're like, "I get it. And actually it's quite good because I'm making sure I've got things right." And then the other part from a teacher side of it, and this is again the thing that stands out for me, is you can see the conversations. You can see the conversations students are having. You can check their understanding, and it has curiosity and those little parts into it. So, being able to see that sets it apart, in my perspective, from some of the other AI platforms that are out there, because you can see those things. And then the human element and the human touch comes into it, where you can go, right, let's go and have a conversation about what you've been saying and see if we can unpack together some of the things that you might be struggling with. So it is a fantastic platform. And I think people, if listening and watching, should go and check it out, because it's a wonderful thing. Out of curiosity then, Mindjoy, before we dive back into it, where did that name come from? What's that about?
Well, it's almost exactly as you say, right? Mindjoy. It's like learning. Oh, there's so many. I think we went through so many iterations, like when you're trying to find a name. But we really wanted to capture this idea that learning should be joyful, but something slightly different to just fun. It's almost, and I do think we're moving to that world where we're looking at more edutainment, making things really hyper engaging and that kind of thing. But there's also something about finding pleasure in challenge. And so there's this researcher, he was one of the founding fathers of the Media Lab at MIT. He's also a South African, which a lot of people don't know. His name was Seymour Papert. And he kind of, if you ever, if anyone out there ever learned to program with a turtle, like the turtle that drew little geometric shapes, or a programming language called Logo. It was also like the basis of Mindstorms, like the Lego robotics kits, is the programming language that he invented for children. But he had this concept of hard fun, and the idea of hard fun was you want to find pleasure and challenge, and the pleasure of figuring things out should give you a sense of reward. And I almost think with AI, to your point of questions, Alex, modeling curiosity and the challenge of answering questions, that's something we risk losing in a world where, everything is so instant. Our tolerance for struggle is decreasing, right? And that's something I think a lot about for young people. Is like, how do we make sure that they're engaged and have experiences that are rich in the way the media is that they consume is rich, but also that they're building their tolerance for challenge. And that's ultimately Mindjoy, which is like, growing your mind should be joyful in many ways.
There's your USP right there. If we can post it into, I think that's a great, but you've hit the nail on the head. And I see it in my own children in terms of their ability to stay within a struggle. It's, from a cog science point of view, you look at it, it's like the zone of proximal development in terms of just being on that cusp of being able to, and as soon as they're like, no, tap out, not interested. What do you mean? It's like, it's too hard. I can't be bothered. And it's like, I think, we definitely risk losing that, the joy of challenge and struggle and overcoming that and what can be gained from those things. So I think it's a perfect advocate, perfect name, and the meaning behind it is something we definitely want to see more in 2024, most definitely with AI. So I've got a few interesting parts as we start to dive into this about your journey, and there's something I got picked up on, not from purpose, but obviously across LinkedIn, this network that we're on, a lot of the voices that we start to hear regarding AI and edtech, very male orientated. And someone said to me when I ran a conference about where are the females, and it's like, well, I did ask, but they were all busy. It's the thing, but that was the honest truth, because it was a weekend. But it almost like seems like an oversaturated market of men. How, from your side of things, as a prominent female in this edtech space, how do you find it? What challenges have you encountered regarding that?
There's so many ways I can answer that question, and I kind of have a couple of spiky point of views on this, because I think you mentioned sort of, I come from a strong woman, like family of women. And so just like a little bit of background on me from this perspective. And I've had some interesting experiences in technology, like with like being a woman in tech and that kind of thing. And sometimes you do wonder, like, oh, am I only getting like invited because I'm a woman in tech, or like, is there merit to my thinking and work, which is like a real thing. And this is something as a South African that we come from, something I think about deeply because, our recent history with apartheid is very, very recent. So I grew up as first generation born free. There's a lot of affirmative action in South Africa where, it was a lot about helping people get into programs previously disadvantaged or underrepresented folks in South Africa that needed to participate. We needed to, have representation in our schooling systems and all of this stuff. But what has happened, we have a lot of what they call quotas that have to be filled. And there's a big question often around merit. Like, am I just getting the spot because I'm filling a quota, or was I actually worth it? Is my work of the best ability? And that's also really interesting. Obviously, South Africa has a very, very interesting history in terms of apartheid, and there was very important restoration and reconciliation efforts as to why we had quota systems and that kind of thing. But 30 years later, into the system and still a struggling education system, people often are still filling quotas and you're not sure why. And a lot of my peers, myself included, you even with my master's program, I remember the very first day there was me and a couple of other women, and we were women and a person of color. I have a hearing disability, so from some personal stuff. So I'm technically disabled too. In South Africa, you get benefits for those things, which is really, really strange. But then from a psychological perspective, you really start questioning am I good? Am I competitive? Am I good enough? And so there's I don't know, I think the world is posing a really interesting dynamic in that way. And it does affect one's confidence. But then, like I said, I came from a family of women, and it's very funny in my family, all my mom, my aunts, even my grandmother were all business owners, and my uncle is a doctor. So my reference of who was entrepreneurial and who did things were women. And it was only when I went to university that I kind of realized that my models were kind of weird, and that wasn't everyone's models. A lot of people didn't think that women, female entrepreneurs and all of that were a thing. They felt a lot of pressure from society and the world at large, in terms of who their models are and that kind of thing. So I've had a really strange experience with this because women make up a small number of people in technology. Even, like you said, in LinkedIn, there are a lot more male dominated voices in the space. If you just look at advocates and technology integrators and all of those kinds of things. And sometimes I ask myself why, why is it? And even in the Mindjoy community, we're constantly trying to champion voices, with teacher features and show diversity of voices, and teachers doing interesting things. But you do see it skews often, it skews to the male, more male teachers or more male influencers on LinkedIn, more men in technology. And I think models are a big part. Models matter a lot. Seeing people that look like you matter a lot. But I also wonder how much is behavioral. So, working on, and the same question often goes with why is it, and we did quite a lot of work with a lot of school teachers around coding literacy and getting girls excited about coding. And we're trying to understand why is it that why are they not as interested in coding, or seemingly? And so there's a couple of reasons. One, seeing models that look like you, just having role models that look like you, that you aspire to be like. It's really difficult when your IT teacher or your coding teacher is an old man, kind of grumpy. It's not really who you aspire to be like. And then if you look at all the sort of social media influencers that, I don't know if you've heard this, but you ask young people, who do they want to, what do they want to be when they grow up? They want to be YouTubers, they want to be gamers, they want to be social media influencers. And then you go, why? Why do they want that versus being in tech, which is a really, really great career, right? It's so many opportunities, all of that. But it's what we see. Like, our models matter so much. But I also think that there's a part of it that's just lonely. Like, it's a lot of solitude work, grinding away alone. And I think possibly like a lot of, I think where you see a lot more women are in sort of social facing roles versus solitary roles, which is kind of interesting. I mean, this is it's a really challenging one because, I don't know. I have a lot of mixed feelings. I've had some strange experiences, Alex, too, where I've actually been censored more by media on as a woman, which has been really interesting. I did an interview once and they asked me who my role models were, and I mentioned men and women. Like other technologists, like I said, Amjad Masad from Replit. I looked up to him. He's been a really, really awesome mentor to me. And they literally, and his wife Haya, and I just love the company. And like literally that was redacted. So like the male role models I had were redacted and only the females were put forward. And so I've actually had weird experiences like that as a female in technology where I'm like, oh, interesting. I can only be one version of a female in tech. That only has female role models, which was a really, really strange experience.
Yeah, it's a weird one because one of my daughters is they both like games, they both like iPads and playing, but you're right in terms of what you say. Like a lot of if they're watching YouTube, there are certain individuals, male and females, but and probably a healthy mix of both, but you see a lot more females on YouTube and influencers, those types of things that they kind of lean to. But from a gaming perspective, they like games, they like playing on games and doing those things. And we've just had, I think in the UAE, and Mark Ryan was over there. He's a big advocate of this in the UAE, but pushing like esports. And he was posting about the esports competition that was taking place. And he's massive in getting people involved. But you're right, it's having those role models that they can see and aspire to be. And yeah, when you look at them across, let's say, an AI or edtech perspective, it is, I would class myself as one of these, a lot of, middle-aged white men. And that's how I'm describing myself at the moment, by the way. And there's a handful of women out there. Yourself, Sophia is out there, Melissa McBride, Amanda Bickerstaff is another one. There's probably a lot more. But and I'm glad now I'm starting to see more of these voices come through on the network that I have. But it's how do you get that out there for teachers? How do you get it out there for students to actually for them to be able to see these? I think that's a really good challenge, an opportunity. I'm going to call it that. It's both a challenge and an opportunity for next year and the future coming is having those role models or pushing those and celebrating those voices. Because it's one of those, it doesn't matter. I think edtech is one of those industries where it shouldn't matter how strong you are, how tall you are, any of those parts. It really doesn't equate to any of those typical divides that we see. It's simply about how good you are. That should literally be it in my opinion with it. So, you've go on, sorry, carry on.
No, I just wanted to sort of add to that, which is like, the one thing I'm really, really concerned about, and I feel that people don't really talk about, is like if we are othering everything or like creating divides, representation matters and modeling matters, but it also matters that we show collaboration. Like I'm also not an advocate for a world where we break other groups down or like target like middle-aged white men as like the sort of the enemy to take down. Because I'm not sure if that like achieves the goal of a collaborative society or a society moving forward. And so like, I think that also matters. Like for me, for example, and maybe I'm just really, really lucky. And like, I'm very glad that I've had really, really great experiences with many role models or like mentors that have been men and who've only been respectful, who've been amazing, like, role models, have been voices of reason, have opened doors for me, introduced me to people, helped along the way. And I think those matter too, to hear those stories about men, like supporting women, by just being themselves, not even necessarily going, not even like taking a advocacy or a justice position, but just being like solid humans in the world. Like, I think that's also, those are models young boys need. Young boys also need to feel valued and have a place and know that they are not inherently bad, or that they have that's an important message for us to drive forward, especially in education. Because I worry about that. I worry about the mental health of young boys too.
Yeah. There's another interesting connection. I've got a guy called George Peterkin, and he's got this Mind Your Health Limited, and he's talked a lot about that. He deals with a lot of young boys who go through these pressures and issues that they see from things. I think it's just simple. If you listen to this, just be a nice person.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to say. Just be a nice person. You'll be absolutely fine.
Yeah. I mean, that's like from Mindjoy's perspective, like there's something we think a lot about is human flourishing, and this is related to technology and just being a well pro-socially adapted human or young person. And we talk about human flourishing in the sense of Martin Seligman. I don't know if you know Martin Seligman, the founder of positive psychology. Basically,
oh yes.
Yeah. And I like to use, he's got this framework called PERMA. And it's saying if you want to achieve human flourishing, you have to think about enable 5 building blocks, which is positive emotion, which is the P, engagement, which is the E, relationships, which is the R, meaning making, or like meaning, which is the M, and accomplishment. And so if you think about that just in like what I don't even call it real world, but physical world, if a young person or even a grown-up experiences all of those things, they generally experience what Seligman describes as flourishing. So they have enough of the right things in place to flourish. And if you think about great learning environments, they also achieve all of those things. Students experience positive emotion, a sense of like joy or competence, or like, school's just not a negative experience. So you actually want to go or participate. You have relationships. So those being peer relationships, good relationships with your teachers or role models at school or through your parents. Good relationships are intact. Meaning. So, and I guess if we come back to the potential of AI and making, and project-based learning and all of those amazing things, but the need and necessity for us to make learning meaningful for young people, relevant, is like, that is so important right now. And then accomplishment, like mastery-based learning systems allow for accomplishment, right? And that zone of proximal development. So if you take this model of PERMA and you think about it in your classroom, and you can almost check, like, do I have the right conditions for my students to flourish? Then those things should be in check, and you can actually try and like design for them in your classroom. But yeah, and then you apply that to a digital world, and you say, can we create digital flourishing for young people? Can we apply these same principles, or can we create online environments for young people where they experience these things too, so that they can flourish? And that's just so important, in a world where we have like mental health issues, and we have these big questions of, is social media enough? Do young people see their role models? How do we reduce anxiety for young people? Yeah. All of those things.
Yeah, that's great. And it leads nicely, because I was going to ask you in terms of what are the, let's say, the types of things that have influenced you and really resonated with you as you've gone on and developed Mindjoy. And obviously that is one of them. Is there anything else that's really had a really massive impact and inspired you in terms of what you're doing with Mindjoy?
PERMA is a big one. So I just went into that. So it's a really, really big one, like understanding like human flourishing and what that takes. And thinking about, I would say almost a secondary thing to that is we've added that meaning making is linked to your ability to wield tools that are relevant and facilitate your participation in society. And that matters a lot for both meaning making, but also a sense of accomplishment. And for people to feel okay, they need to experience a sense of competence. it doesn't matter what it is they're doing. They do have to experience a sense of competence, though, for the self to be okay. I think this is actually a huge question in the world of AI. Like in a world where machine and human output become indistinguishable, how does that affect our meaning making? And what is it, my role in society? What is my role in the classroom? What is it that I spend my time on? What are our values? And I think actually, this is, I think, a growing trend, but a lot of education is moving towards values-based systems more than it is about, accreditation per se. But I think we'll see a big shift in terms of education systems organizing around values. The ways parents choose schools, the principles around which schools organize themselves, what pedagogies are they adopting, what methods are they adopting, what frameworks, often will be values-based decisions. I'm curious what you see.
Well, first of all, I'm starting to see those things you already mentioned, like within my school over the last couple of years, definitely post-COVID as well. So the PERMA model, we have that, or at least the equivalent of it. So we were introduced to it, obviously, from, I can't remember the name, you probably know, the school in Australia that obviously run a lot of the positive education where this is really housed. Is it Wollongong? I don't know if it's that one. I know another one, which is Nudger. You'll probably find out. You could probably tell me. But we have that filtering into our school. And then they use something called Peak. So obviously with my kids in primary, I see this at the positive education side of things. And even across a lot of the schools that I've been into or worked in, you're now starting to see values in terms of being up along the walls, being embedded into the classroom in terms of how they deliver content and the types of things they want to develop them. So, the IB one, in terms of learning characteristics, has always been there, and I think that's a good foundation to start from. But it's when you start to add in things like caring and empathy that go into it. When you talk about perspective, in other people's shoes, you're starting to then think about different values. And parents, I think, are, and it's important to us, starting to choose more about the values and that the school integrates and that children hopefully come out with as well. So there is a lot of that there, which is really, really good.
I suppose it's also really interesting, like being part of international school communities. Like a lot of Mindjoy, like a lot of the teachers we work with are like IB schools or Cambridge schools, a lot of international community schools. And that's been really, like there, it's a really interesting thing because you do have this diversity of perspective, right? Like you said, like being able, different perspectives, people from different backgrounds, different value systems, different cultures, and almost needing something to come together around. And you almost have that, grouping, like what are the things that actually bring us together and what do we share? And that becoming like really important.
And that obviously this is probably the third or fourth time that we've spoken together. And every time that I speak with you, I'm always blown away by just how well informed and knowledgeable you are, not just about the AI and edtech, but just the research that goes on around it. And I've always found myself in awe of educators and individuals who are able to, who want to go out and read all this, but then obviously be able to utilize it. So for those people who are listening and watching this and kind of want to maybe get more into this or learn more about this, how do you stay up to date with current trends and what's going on, in the world of edtech and education and those types of things? And what advice or direction to resources would you give those people who are interested in kind of following that path?
That's a hard one. Just because there's so much out there. And I almost, you could make I could make like 100 different types of recommendations because like I read a lot. And I like reading like physical books, audio books. I find like I just read as much as I can. I also read a lot of academic journals and papers and follow researchers that I'm interested in, specifically around the phenomena that I'm like curious about. But if I had to distill that as like sort of something actionable, like where to start, I would almost encourage folks to start with a question that they're just interested in. And if you can like start with the question that you find interesting, or that at least holds your attention, say longer than 30 seconds, or like 30 minutes, an hour, but quite something that's interesting enough for you that you will go deeper. Because like, I'm not sure if you know, but like with curiosity, there's this really interesting, I love talking to people about curiosity, because often you think of curiosity as the ability to just ask lots of questions and be curious, and typically I would say most of us are like that type of curious, where we have like 1,000 tabs open on our computers with all the things we were meant to read or we're like, oh, that was interesting. Like, I'm going to open that. Like, oh, I'm going to get to that later. Like, oh, I want to, like, that also caught my attention. And so I think generally humans, and like as people, we are very curious. And that's typically what you call type 1 curiosity. So it's like, you're generally interested in the world, and you even get people who are not. And so the first thing is just to like find things you're interested in. So like question generation, like if you can practice asking questions and generate questions you're interested in, that's like the first thing to do around education. So if I'm an educator, I'm like, oh, I'm interested in, neurodiversity in my classroom, or, tech integration, or AI, or how AI is going to change personalized learning paths for my students, or deep learning, and whatever that like question you have is, or like how do I like encourage lifelong learning in my classroom, or what are the important skills that young people need, and how do I introduce them in my classroom? Whatever those questions are, just like spend time generating a lot of questions, and then see which ones have like commonalities or themes that link to each other, and see if you can almost like get a meaty question that holds your attention for a long time. Because there's a type 2 curiosity, which is actually more skills based, being like, do you have the ability to create structure and a method to finding answers to your questions, and then do you follow through with that? So that's actually type 2 curiosity, which is the ability to go deep with something. I think if you can root it in a question that interests you, and then use your question to start finding like thought leaders on LinkedIn is a great place, like that's, I guess, how we all met. But LinkedIn's a great place for meeting like-minded people, or people who share interests in you. And LinkedIn now even has that whole thought leadership, top voices feature now, where based on a theme that you're interested in, it will pose like a lot of top voices on LinkedIn who are talking about those things, questions to participate in the conversation and surface those thought leaders. So, LinkedIn's a great place for finding thought leaders. I actually find Twitter or X is a great place also for finding really innovative thinkers in like, progressive pedagogy. Do you not love Twitter, not X?
It's Marmite to me. I've tried it for a part, and then some of them that are on there, you can get some wonderful snippets of parts, and some of the other parts, I just find it, and this is me being honest, teachers whinging about teaching, or just negativity. And I've said this to someone before, it's like teachers aren't happy unless they're whinging about something. And so I get a real dichotomy of the useful, positive information versus the negative, like vitriol. And so I'm on it, but I'm sporadically on it. And I find myself questioning, should I just remove myself from it in 2024?
Interesting. With Twitter, like I've honestly met some of the most extraordinary people on Twitter. Almost all of like, a lot of like Mindjoy angel investors, for example, I met on Twitter or X, for example, and they actually been like, I was reflecting on this, sort of the end of the year. I was like, oh wow, X has been incredible for me to meet people and build relationships with extraordinary thinkers that I've then followed up with and met in real life. LinkedIn also similarly, but actually more so on X. And so I think curating who you follow like matters a lot. like investing where I don't think like LinkedIn doesn't matter so much in terms of finding voices or surfacing interesting folks. But then like I'm quite deliberate about trying to follow only like 150 people and stick to that. So I'm like sort of always curating lists and that kind of thing. And especially with AI research and folks doing really, really cutting edge things. And like X is great for that, like to really stay like on the edge there, which is maybe a little bit less for teachers, like specifically around like useful things in the classroom. But if you're trying to expose yourself to what's happening, in the private sector or in terms of future of work and trying to map the future of work to the future of your classroom, I think seeing that is quite useful.
Yeah, I was smart. I was laughing there to myself because I had this image of you just at your device, like just going through the list of who's on there. I was like, right, who's not cull, just like just like really keeping it to 150. Yeah, really keeping it to 150 people.
Exactly.
Yeah. And why not? Maybe that's what I need to be doing. Maybe I need to be like more specific with who I have. But the thing is with that algorithm, then it puts other people. Anyway, I think Twitter is market. Some people, really go into it. Maybe I just need to spend a bit more time. But again, I think the advice you've given for someone who's starting up and wants to get involved, I think that's a really good piece. Like LinkedIn, Twitter, and really just be specific about the types of individuals you want to follow. But that advice you gave about the questions, I think that's gold dust. I think it's absolutely magical in terms of it would work so effectively for teachers doing their professional development as well. Like write out that question, write out a question as something you're interested in or want to learn more about in the classroom. Like what would happen if, or why does this? And, those types of things. I think that's really great advice, Gabi. I think for anyone listening, watching in terms of how to get started and find an area, even can be quite broad, that they can just start learning about and apply it to their teaching. I think that's fantastic. So from your side, as we start to draw this to a close for looking ahead to 2024, what is it that you're excited about for the future of Mindjoy, or just the general future of where this space is taking us?
Oh, yeah. I think there's so many things to be excited by. If I just also link back to like the idea of like, it's the end of the year and like we're going into the new year, or, it's like a new year. And what are the things we're excited by? Like rooting something in a question or curiosity is kind of a really great way to go. Like, what are the things you're curious about, and how could you like plan your year around your curiosity? That's sort of how I like to think about it. In terms of Mindjoy, like the curiosities and things we're excited by are like, I think in the AI space specifically, like multimodal experiences, introducing multimodal experiences into classrooms, and seeing how that shapes interactions between teachers and students. I'm like really, really, really excited by that, like what that might look like for a teacher to be able to almost create these mixed reality experiences. So like really help like the textbook come to life. That's like something I'm really excited by. And I think just in general, like mixed reality as a trend is something really, really interesting. I don't think it's so as far off as we think, especially if you look at how young people use technology and platforms themselves, like the fluency and fluidity of mixed reality experiences for, I'm sure even with your kids, like how easily do they use filters or like think of themselves in both physical and digital worlds, right? That's like a really interesting space. And I'm super curious about like how we bring that to the classroom, and also how do we make sure that teachers are part of that experience, educators and parents are part of that, and also being able to support young people with the right infrastructure, but also scaffolding and community around these things, because I think that's going to become even more important. Just like, a lot of people are speaking about AI literacy as a really, really big one. I'm not so focused on AI literacy as another thing teachers have to introduce into the classroom, but rather almost what I want to say our AI competency. which is like our ability and skills to use AI responsibly, effectively, and like purposefully in the classroom. And I think that's more like a focus on competency. So we're excited about helping educators and students build their AI competencies in 2024.
I think that's awesome. Yeah, that's something that's really been on my mind as well about competencies. And you've hit the nail on the head with how do we bring it into the classroom. I think we're seeing 2023 was a lot of teachers, and not many to be honest, but obviously teachers getting to grips with it and how they can use it. And I think next year really needs to be a shift in how do we integrate it into our subjects for student use. So again, that idea of competencies, I think is a great idea. So yeah, we look forward to seeing Mindjoy's list of AI competencies in the future there, Gabi.
Oh, the challenge accepted. Your AI competency framework on its way will be my holiday project.
No, we've spoke about this. We need downtime. We said we need downtime to kick back and relax. So no, I think Gabi, I always enjoy talking to you. But today has been another great conversation with you. So thank you ever so much for coming on and sharing your insights and telling us more about Mindjoy. It's been wonderful. If people want to find out more about Mindjoy, they want to obviously come and follow you on X or on LinkedIn, where's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, LinkedIn's great. If you're curious to try out Mindjoy, you can go onto our website, which is mindjoy.com, or you can reach out to me on Twitter. Like it's just Gabi Immelman, like my name. I'm pretty good about replying on Twitter too. So and I love chatting to people there. So if you're on, I keep calling it Twitter X. I have not made this change yet. Like I had a friend that actually said about like it's not you don't tweet short lines anymore because you can like write longer form content on X now. And again, this is about attention and engagement. And so he was like, oh, it's about extrapolating now.
Extrapolating. X. Yeah. It's not going to catch on. I don't know. Okay, perfect. So we can get you on LinkedIn, we can get you on X, and obviously we've got the website. I highly recommend, if you haven't checked it out, go and have a look at this because I think it's a super platform, and my students love it. And I was very fortunate to get the beta version and the trial through as well. So from that side of things, it's definitely something you should probably add to your arsenal for teaching for 2024. But other than that, Gabi, thank you. Go on.
Alex, that's good. I just interrupted you, but the other place which like anyone, educators, like we host like weekly PDs, online PDs. So if you're an educator looking to explore AI or just have questions, we have like thematic sessions, and we have fireside chats. You were on one, but we have a hands-on PD session, which is just really a time for teachers to learn by doing, talk about competency. It's not your typical webinar. We generally partner with other educators doing interesting things in their classroom. So really trying to facilitate a community that learns by doing and really, share teachers with actual hands-on experience in their classrooms. What are the challenges they're facing and what they like, how do they think about it and overcome it? And like, if Mindjoy plays a little part in helping make that possible, we're really excited to do that. So we have those sessions. So we have a calendar on our website too. People can register it, and it's a combination of paid and free sessions. And the other thing we're doing with our paid sessions is we're enabling teachers to host sessions for their own communities. And it's like a teachers pay teachers model. So like helping teachers also like monetize and share, be rewarded for their creator, knowledge and creation and facilitating that. So we have a really exciting calendar. Hopefully I can twist your arm to host one.
I'm sure you can twist my arm to host one. I think coming full circle on this, when we set out at the start and you said, Gabi Immelman is about community and about this enriching experiences, teachers' knowledge, students' experiences within a community, from everything you are doing within your community in South Africa to the global community now, I think you're definitely fulfilling your, I'm going to say mantra, as it were. I think with everything you're doing and bringing that development side and just the fun and enjoyment, again, anyone who gets to spend time with Gabi or just listen to you like today, you are so passionate about what you're doing, so fun and effervescent with when you talk about these things. It's very infectious. And then so from a 2024 perspective, it is exciting about what you're going to do, and also then the impact, the positive impact I think that's going to have on the teaching and learning community around the world.
Thanks, Alex. That's super cool. Like, I think maybe that's my challenge. Like, I'm going to have to rework that as a mantra for 2024.
There you go.
Like,
another challenge for you.
And invite everyone to join us to unleash curiosity, you know, in classrooms for boundless learning. That's like the mission.
There we go. That's my question for 2024 is how can I, create more curiosity in the education space? There we go. We'll see if I can fit that one in.
Oh, that's a good one. I'm going to fly on my head now.
There we go. Amazing. All right, Gabi, thank you ever so much for today. You take care and we will speak soon.
Thanks, Alex.